The air hums with the faint crackle of a fire, its embers glowing in the dimness of a Galilean night. I imagine myself there, an explorer perched on a hillside, the Mount of Olives stretching dark and silent before me. Below, the world churns. Torchlight flickers in Jerusalem's streets. Voices barter and bicker, and the dust of human striving settles into the cracks of the earth. But up here, the wind carries a different song. The low murmur of a man praying, his words rising like incense to a sky studded with stars. It's Jesus, retreating from the clamor to commune with the Father, and I feel the weight of his solitude press against my own chest. I have known that pull myself, not on a biblical mountaintop, but in the quiet of a childhood attic, thumbing through my grandfather's worn Bible, sensing there was something beyond the walls of my small world. That memory flickers now, a spark that draws me into the heart of this paradox. To reach the world, we must first leave it. It's an invitation as unsettling as it is irresistible, and it beckons us to climb higher, to see farther, to step into a story that rewrites our own. This isn't a call to abandon the earth in some ascetic flight, packing our bags for a hermit's cave or a cloistered retreat. No, it's a summons to shift our footing, to stand on a vantage point so lofty that the world below transforms from a maze of distractions into a field ripe for harvest. Pastor John MacArthur unfurls this truth with the urgency of a cartographer charting unclaimed territory. Before we can reach the world, we have to leave it. But at first, it jars the senses, like a compass needle spinning wildly before locking north. How do you touch something by stepping away? Yet the deeper you trek into this idea, the clearer it becomes. Proximity blinds us. When we're tangled in the world's rhythms, its relentless chase for more, its clamor for approval, its seductive promise of comfort, we lose the clarity to see its wounds. We're like climbers too busy scrambling over rocks to notice the valley gasping for water below. Jesus embodied this paradox with every step he took. John 8:23 echoes through the centuries. Ye are from beneath, I am from above. Ye are of this world, I am not of this world. He walked our dusty roads, broke bread with sinners, and wept over Jerusalem's stubborn heart. Yet his spirit never belonged to the soil he trod. Picture him in the marketplace, jostled by merchants and beggars, his hands healing a leper while his eyes lift to an unseen horizon. He saw the crowd not just as a throng of bodies, but as souls adrift, sheep without a shepherd, eternal beings cloaked in temporary flesh. That vision didn't come from standing shoulder to shoulder with the masses. It flowed from his communion with the Father, from nights spent on hillsides like the one I imagine now. He left the world, not its people, but its mindset, to reach it with a love that pierced through time. For us, this leaving is less about geography and more about the geography of the soul. I think of my own life, the moments I've been snared by the world's nets, scrolling endlessly through feeds that promise connection but deliver emptiness, or chasing a promotion that glittered until it dulled in my grasp. Those are the times I've felt most impotent, unable to offer anything lasting to the people around me. But then there are other moments, a late-night conversation with a friend, where I set aside my own agenda and listened, really listened, and felt a whisper of something divine thread through my words. That's when I brushed against this truth. To give the world what it needs, I have to shed what it demands. It's not about rejecting the physical, Bills still need paying, dishes still pile up, but about refusing to let those things define me. It's a mental exodus, a deliberate uprooting of roots sunk too deep in transient soil. Consider the sailor lost at sea, a figure MacArthur doesn't mention, but whose plight mirrors this principle. His ship is sinking, waves clawing at the deck, and he's frantic to signal for rescue. If he stays in the hold, clutching the wreckage, he's blind to the horizon. His cries drown in the storm. But if he climbs the mast, battered but determined, he gains a perch above the chaos. From there, he spots the distant light of a rescue ship, and his flare cuts through the dark. That's us, tethered to a world that's sinking under its own weight. Materialism, pride, despair. We can't signal hope from the deck. We have to ascend, not to escape, but to see. Not to retreat, but to return with something worth carrying. A message, a mercy, a glimpse of eternity. This ascent reshapes how we engage with everything. Take a mundane Tuesday. The barista hands you coffee, her smile tight with exhaustion. The coworker snaps over a missed deadline, his voice edged with stress. If you're earthbound, you sip and scroll, grumble and grudge. But if you've left the world, if your heart's been tuned to a higher frequency, you see her weariness as a chance to offer kindness, his frustration as a crack where grace might seep in. You're not just reacting, you're reaching, because you've glimpsed the world through Christ's eyes. MacArthur drives this home with Scripture's hammer. Romans 12:2 urges us, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." That renewal isn't a one-time rinse. It's a daily climb, a choice to dwell where Jesus dwelt, to think what he thought, to love what he loved of. The paradox unfolds further when we realize this leaving isn't solitary, it's communal. Jesus didn't ascend to isolation. He ascended to intercede, to prepare a place, to send the Spirit. Our departure from the world's grip binds us tighter to its people. I recall a mission trip years ago, standing in a humid village where kids tugged at my sleeves, their laughter mingling with the ache of their bare feet on cracked earth. I wept then, not out of pity, but because I'd stepped far enough from my own culture's bubble to feel their need, and more piercingly, to feel Christ's longing for them. Back home, that clarity faded, swallowed by familiar routines. MacArthur laments this too. I can't push my culture away to look at it objectively. I'm too caught in it. It's a confession that stings, but it's also a spur. To keep climbing, to keep leaving, until the world's true poverty of soul burns in our bones. So where does this leave us? Explorers of a truth so vast it defies easy grasp. It leaves us at a crossroads, with a choice as old as the Galilean hills. To stay below, mired in the dust, or to rise, to set our sights on the things above where Christ sits. It's not a rejection of the world's beauty, the sunsets, the laughter, the tender ache of human connection, but a refusal to let those things be all we see. To reach the world, we leave it. Not with our feet, but with our affections, our priorities, our very selves. And from that height, we don't just touch the earth, we transform it. One renewed mind, one outstretched hand, one whispered prayer at a time. The wind howls across the Scottish moor, tugging at the edges of my coat as I stand, an explorer caught in the shadow of a weathered kirk. It's 1839, and the air smells of peat and rain-soaked stone. Inside, a voice rises. not loud but piercing, like a blade of light through the gloom. It's Robert Murray McChaney, preaching to a congregation of rough-hewn souls, and I'm there unseen, a witness to something holy unfolding. I feel a pang of memory, my own teenage years, sitting in a creaky pew, watching my pastor's hands tremble as he spoke of grace. A moment when I first sensed words could carry more than sound. Now, here on this imagined moor, that sensation deepens. McChaney's voice doesn't just fill the room, it cracks it open, and I'm drawn into a mystery where the heavens stoop to touch the earth. His secret, they say, was simple yet staggering. He dwelt in the holiness of God, and from that height, he reached a world I long to understand. This isn't a tale of a man born extraordinary. It's a testament to what happens when the ordinary ascends. McChaney wasn't a towering figure in stature, frail, often ill. He looked more like a scholar than a firebrand. Yet step into that Dundee church, and you'd see something else. Miners with coal dust still clinging to their knuckles. Farmers whose hands bore the scars of plow and storm. Men who'd faced life's brutality without flinching. And there they sit, faces crumpling, tears carving paths through grime as McChaney speaks of a savior who sees them, knows them, loves them. Strong men hard and stern melt like wax before the fire, one observer wrote, and I can almost hear the creak of pews under the weight of their heaving chests, the air thick with a surrender no earthly force could wring from them. What alchemy turned words into such power? It wasn't rhetoric or theatrics. It was the echo of a life lived above the world, a heart so steeped in God's presence that it poured out like molten gold. To grasp this, picture McChaney alone, not in the pulpit, but in the quiet of his study, the flicker of a candle dancing across pages of scripture. He's not chasing fame or crafting clever sermons. He's wrestling with God, pleading for his nearness, drinking deep from the well of divine holiness. A friend once said he seemed to have entered into the secret places of the holiness of God. And I see him there, forehead pressed against the desk, whispering prayers that rise like smoke to the throne. It's not a mystical trance or a showy ecstasy. It's a deliberate climb, a soul scaling the heights of communion where the air is thin and pure. He didn't stumble into this. He sought it day after day until the God he met there reshaped him. And when he stepped back into the world, he carried that holiness like a torch, its light so fierce it softened stone-hard hearts. This ascent mirrors the paradox we've traced. To reach the world, you must leave it. McChaney didn't abandon his flock. He walked their muddy streets, visited their sickbeds, wept over their sins, but his spirit never settled there. He lived in the heavenlies, as MacArthur calls it, a realm where God's heartbeat thundered louder than the clamor of Dundee's mills. I think of Jesus on that Galilean hillside from our last climb, retreating to pray, and I see the thread connecting them. Both found their strength, not in the crowd's applause, but in the Father's presence. For McChaney, this wasn't a retreat from duty, it was the source of it. Each sermon became a bridge, spanning the gap between eternity and earth, built from timbers hewn in solitude with God. And when he spoke, it wasn't just his voice. God's own breath seemed to stir the air, melting resistance like wax before a flame. What does this mean for us, explorers tracing the same path? It's a challenge that cuts deep. I've known moments of preaching myself, not from a pulpit, but in quiet talks with friends, trying to share a truth that matters. Too often, my words fall flat, tangled in my own distractions, scrolling notifications, fretting over tomorrow's to-do list. McChaney's life whispers a rebuke. You can't give what you haven't sought. If I want my words to carry weight, To soften a cynic's sneer or comfort a broken spirit, I need to climb where he climbed. Not to a Scottish moor, perhaps, but to my own secret place. A chair by the window at dawn, scripture open, phone silenced, heart straining for God's voice. It's there, in that stillness, that I might taste what McChaney knew. A holiness that doesn't just change me, but spills over to change others. His impact wasn't confined to those tear-stained pews. It rippled outward, a stone dropped in time's river. McChaney died young, at 29, yet his legacy endures. Letters, hymns, a life that still preaches. I imagine a widow in Dundee years later, clutching his words as she mourns, or a missionary in some far-off land, inspired by his zeal to carry the gospel further. That's the power of a life lived above. It doesn't fade with the body's breath. MacArthur turns to him when frustrated with my own carnality, and I feel that too, the ache to shed earthbound weights and rise. McChaney shows us it's possible, not through superhuman grit, but through a simple, stubborn choice, to dwell where God dwells, to let his fire refine us, to step back into the world as carriers of his light. This isn't about mimicking McChaney's era. No one's suggesting we trade our laptops for quills or our cities for moors. It's about the principle beneath his story. Ascent precedes influence. Think of your own world. Maybe it's a classroom where students slump in apathy, a workplace thick with tension, a home where silence hides pain. You can't reach those places with platitudes or borrowed faith. You need something forged in the heavenlies. I recall a night I sat with a friend, her life unraveling, and instead of fumbling for fixes, I just listened, prayed silently, felt God's nearness bridge our gap. It wasn't dramatic, no wax melted, but she left lighter, and I knew I'd touched the edge of what McChaney mastered. That's the invitation. Climb, commune, return. From that height, even our smallest acts, words, glances, kindnesses carry the scent of eternity. So we stand, like I do now, on this imagined moor, the kirk's echo fading into the wind. McChaney's life isn't a relic to admire, it's a map to follow. He left the world, not its people, but its pull, to reach it with a power we crave, but rarely grasp. The question lingers as the scene dissolves. Will we climb too? Will we seek those secret places, not for escape, but for equipping? The world waits below, hard and stern, yet not beyond melting. If only we'll ascend to the flame. The night presses heavy over Jerusalem, a velvet shroud pierced by the faint glow of oil lamps flickering in the distance. I find myself an explorer once more, scrambling up a rocky slope, the Mount of Olives rising beneath my feet like a silent sentinel. The air is cool, scented with olive groves and the dust of a day's end, and ahead, a solitary figure kneels, Jesus, his silhouette stark against the starry expanse. His voice is a murmur, lost to the wind, yet it pulls me in, a thread of intimacy weaving through the dark. I'm reminded of a night years ago, lying awake in my college dorm, the world's weight crushing my chest until I slipped outside to pace under the sky, whispering fears to a God I barely knew. That raw solitude echoes here, on this mount, where the Son of Man steps away from the chaos to find his Father. And in that retreat, I sense the pulse of a truth that could steady us all. To reach the world, he first left it, not in disdain, but in devotion. This wasn't a casual stroll or a bid for respite after a long day's work. Luke 21:37 paints the rhythm of it. And in the daytime he was teaching in the temple, and at night he went out and abode in the mount that is called the Mount of Olives. Picture the scene, crowds pressing in, their questions sharp as thorns, their needs a tide that never ebbs. He heals a blind man's eyes, spars with Pharisees' traps, feeds thousands with a boy's lunch, each act a marvel, yet each draining the human frame he chose to wear. The disciples, bleary-eyed, stumble to their beds, but Jesus doesn't join them. He climbs instead, sandals crunching on stone, the city's hum fading behind him. Up here, the mount isn't just a hill, it's a threshold, a thin place where earth brushes heaven, where he sheds the day's dust to breathe the air of his true home. It's not escape, it's alignment, a recalibration of soul to the Father's will. I see him there, knees bent in the dirt, hands lifted or clasped. I can't tell, but the posture speaks surrender. The Mount of Olives becomes his sanctuary, a nightly pilgrimage to the source of his strength. Think of Gethsemane, that later, darker night, when the weight of the cross looms and his sweat falls like blood. Even then, it's here he comes, not to the temple's grandeur or the disciples' company, but to this quiet slope, crying, "Not my will, but thine be done." That prayer didn't sprout in the moment's panic. It was forged in these countless nights, each retreat a brick in the foundation of his mission. MacArthur notes, "That was his real world, really, and I feel the truth of it. Here, where no eyes watch, no hands grasp, he communes with the Father, and from that communion flows the power to heal, to teach, to die. He leaves the world's noise to reach its need, a rhythm as steady as the stars above." What does this mean for us? Tracing his steps across time. It's not about finding a literal mount, though I envy the thought of a hill to climb when life presses in. It's about carving out our own olive groves, spaces where we shed the world's clamor and stand before God. I've felt that need in my own bones. Days when the phone buzzes like a hornet, when deadlines stack like stones, when even the church feels more like a machine than a refuge. Once I drove to a park at dusk, left my phone in the car and sat by a stream, letting the water's gurgle drown out my thoughts. No grand visions came, but a stillness did, a whisper that I wasn't alone. That's the mount for me, not a place, but a posture, a turning away from the world's pull to hear the Father's voice. Jesus didn't retreat to hide. He retreated to return, armed with clarity and love we can barely fathom. This leaving isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. Imagine him without those nights, exhausted, adrift, his words thinning to echoes of human wisdom. The miracles might still dazzle, but the depth, the piercing, "I am not of this world," of John 8:23, would fade. He needed the mount as surely as we need air, a tether to the heavenlies that kept him steady amid the storm. We're no different. MacArthur ties it back to the paradox. As long as we're earthbound, as long as we are preoccupied with the world system, we will not reach the world with the gospel the way God would want. I've lived that earthbound blur, rushing through prayers like a checklist, chasing approval in likes and nods, only to find my faith brittle, my witness mute. But when I climb, when I shut the door, open the word, let silence reign, something shifts. I see my neighbor's scowl as a mask for loneliness, my child's tantrum as a cry for presence, and I respond not with my frayed edges, but with a grace borrowed from above. The Mount wasn't just his refuge, it was his forge. Each night hammered his humanity into alignment with divinity, tempering his resolve for the day ahead. I picture him descending at dawn, the first light gilding his face, eyes bright with purpose. The crowd waits, skeptics, seekers, the broken, and he meets them not as a weary preacher, but as the son who's been with the Father. That's the power we're offered, not a permanent retreat, but a rhythm of withdrawal and return. I've seen it work in small ways. A morning spent in quiet before a tense meeting, and my words carried peace instead of heat. A Sabbath kept when the world screamed produce, and I found strength to listen to a friend's grief. These aren't mountaintop epiphanies. They're sparks from a steady fire, kindled in the leaving. Yet there's a tension here, one Jesus navigated and we stumble through. He didn't stay on the mount. He went back, sandals dusty again, hands outstretched to a world that would crucify him. John 17:15 captures his prayer. I pray not that thou shouldest take them out of the world, but that thou shouldest keep them from the evil. The retreat isn't the end, it's the means. We leave to return, not as escapees, but as emissaries, carrying the scent of olives and the weight of eternity. I think of a nurse I met once, her shifts endless, yet her smile steady. She told me she prayed in the stairwell between patients, a fleeting mount that fueled her care. That's the call. Find your slope, your stairwell, your stream, and climb. Not to abandon the world, but to reach it with something it can't forge on its own. So I linger here, the explorer on this imagined ridge. The city's glow a faint pulse below. Jesus rises from his knees, his face turned to the dawn, and I feel the pull to follow. Not just to watch, but to live this rhythm. The Mount of Olives isn't a relic of his story. It's a map for ours. We leave the world, not its beauty or its brokenness, but its grip, to stand where he stood, to hear what he heard. And when we descend, we carry not just our own strength, but his, a light that cuts through the dark, a love that reaches where words alone can't go. The climb is daily, the return inevitable, and in that dance, the world shifts, one touched soul at a time. The dawn breaks over a suburban street, a soft gray light spilling through my window as I sit, an explorer hunched over a steaming mug, the world still asleep outside. The kitchen hums faintly, refrigerator whirring, clock ticking, and I flip open Colossians 3, the words, "Seek those things which are above," staring back at me like a challenge etched in ink. My mind drifts to a morning years back, bleary-eyed on a train, headphones in, watching commuters scroll their screens, my own heart heavy with a vague hunger I couldn't name. Now, in this quiet, that hunger sharpens into a question. How do you live in heaven when your feet are planted on linoleum? When the day ahead brims with emails, spills, and the mundane ache of being human? Pastor MacArthur's voice rises through the page. Your inside lives in heaven, and your outside lives here. And I'm pulled into a paradox that feels less like a riddle and more like a lifeline. A call to dwell above while standing below, to weave eternity into the threads of now. This isn't a flight of fancy or a summons to some ethereal haze. It's a gritty, practical reality, as real as the coffee warming my hands. MacArthur insists, until a Christian in his heart and his soul and his mind has learned to live his spiritual life in the heavenlies, he will never be able to touch the earth with the truth of God. It's a bold claim, one that jolts me from the inertia of routine. Picture yourself in the thick of a Tuesday, traffic snarling, a co-worker's curt email stinging, the kids bickering over cereal bowls. The world tugs, insistent, demanding your full allegiance. Worry about this, chase that, resent the other. But what if, in that swirl, your spirit lifts? Not to ignore the chaos, but to reframe it. Colossians 3:1-2 beckons. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. It's a dual existence, body here, soul there, and the tension between them is where transformation brews. Jesus lived this split-screen life flawlessly. He haggled with fishermen, sweated under the Judean sun, felt hunger gnaw his gut, yet his mind never strayed from the Father's throne. I see him at a well, dust on his robe, speaking to a Samaritan woman, his words piercing her shame with heaven's clarity. Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. John 4:13-14. He's ankle deep in her world, yet his spirit soars above it, offering not just water but eternity. That's the model, not a retreat from earth's mess, but a refusal to let it rule. I've tasted this faintly, standing in a grocery line, the cashier's exhaustion plain, and instead of impatience, a prayer rises, unbidden, shifting my focus from my cart to her soul. It's small, but it's the heavenlies breaking through, a crack where light seeps in. How do we climb there, though, when gravity pulls so hard? MacArthur roots it in the mind. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans chapter 12:2. And I feel the weight of that charge. It starts with what we feed our thoughts. Imagine swapping the morning news, all doom and clamor, for Philippians 4:8. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, think on these things. You linger there. Truth, justice, beauty, and the day's edges soften. I tried this once, sitting in traffic, reciting that verse instead of cursing the delay. By the time I parked, my jaw was unclenched, my heart oddly light. It's not denial, it's discipline, training the mind to orbit Christ rather than chaos. Scripture becomes the tether, Psalm 23's still waters, Matthew 11's easy yoke, lifting you above the fray, not to float, but to see. This ascent reshapes the ordinary. Take that co-worker's email, sharp, accusing. Earthbound, I fire back, defenses up. But from the heavenlies, I pause, breathe, ask, what's behind this? Maybe stress, fear, a wound I can't see. I respond with a calm I don't feel, and later he softens, apologizes. Or the kids squabble, loud, grating. Down here I snap. Up there I kneel, hear their real cries, tiredness, need, and hug instead of scold. These aren't miracles, they're choices, born from a mind tuned to a higher frequency. MacArthur says it won't happen unless we live there, and I get it. Without that perch, I'm just me, frayed and finite. With it, I'm a conduit, frail but filled, touching earth with something borrowed from above. It's not effortless. Don't mistake this for a feel-good fix. The world fights back, a tide of distractions pulling us under. I've failed plenty, doom scrolling till my eyes blur, fretting over bills till sleep flees, letting petty slights fester. Each slip proves MacArthur's point. An earthbound heart can't reach far, but the climb's worth it. I recall a night my daughter asked, "Why are you sad?" Her small hand on mine, and instead of brushing her off, I prayed silently, then told her about hope, not just hurt. She nodded, eyes wide, and I knew I'd given her something eternal, not just a dad's shrug. That's the heavenlies in action, not a permanent high, but a steady anchor, lifting you enough to lift others. This dual life echoes Jesus' Mount of Olives rhythm, leaving to return, and McChaney's holy fire. It's practical, yes, but it's also radical, a rewiring of what we call real. The heavenlies aren't a distant shore we'll reach someday. They're here now, in the space between heartbeats, if we'll claim them. I think of a friend, a single mom, who journals prayers at 3 a.m. between shifts. Her mount, her tether, and her kids feel it in her patience, her neighbors in her kindness. She's not rich or rested, but she's radiant, touching earth because her inside lives elsewhere. That's the invitation. Dwell above, not to flee but to fight, to bring heaven's truth to a world that's forgotten it exists. So I sit here, coffee gone cold, the street waking outside. The explorer in me stirs, tracing this map from ink to life. Living in the heavenlies isn't a dream, it's a dare, a daily step from linoleum to eternity. Jesus did it, McChaney followed, and now the pen's in my hand, the path under my feet. The world's still there, messy, loud, needy. But from this height, it's not just a burden. It's a canvas waiting for strokes of grace I can only paint if I rise. The clock ticks, the day calls, and I close the book, not to end the journey, but to live it. One thought, one act, one heaven-touched moment at a time. The sea roars against the brightened shore, a restless gray beast clawing at the sand as I stand. An explorer swept into 1865, the wind stinging my face with salt and spray. Gulls scream overhead, and in the distance, a hymn drifts from a church, bright, smug, a chorus of security that grates against the horizon's vast unknown. Hudson Taylor paces beside me, his coat flapping, his eyes fixed on the waves as if they whisper secrets too heavy to bear. I feel a jolt of recognition. A summer day in my youth, standing on a pier, watching the ocean swallow the sun. My heart inexplicably heavy for a world I couldn't name. Now, Taylor's agony sharpens that ache. Unable to bear the sight of a congregation of 1,000 and more Christian people rejoicing in their own security while millions were perishing for lack of knowledge, he wrote. And I'm drawn into his storm. A man who left the world's comfort to reach its edge, driven by a burden born where Christ dwells. This isn't a quaint missionary tale. It's a collision of heaven and earth, a life so steeped in the divine that it bled for the lost. Taylor wasn't a stranger to England's pews. He'd sung those hymns, sat among the bonneted wives and scrubbed children. But that day on the beach, he saw through the veneer. Brighton pulsed with Victorian pride. Steamships conquered seas, factories churned wealth, and the church basked in its own glow. Yet Taylor's heart beat elsewhere, in China's vast interior, where millions lived and died without a whisper of the gospel. His biographer captures it. He lived so much in the presence of Jesus Christ that he began to feel the great heartbeat of Jesus for the lost souls. I see him there, sand crunching underfoot, the hymn fading as he falls to his knees, praying for 24 laborers to join him. It's not ambition, it's anguish, a cry wrenched from a soul that's climbed to the heavenlies and glimpsed the world as God does. That ascent mirrors everything we've traced. Jesus on the Mount, McChaney in his kirk, the daily lift from linoleum to eternity. Taylor didn't stumble into this burden. He sought it, dwelling so long in Christ's presence that his longing became his own. Picture him in quiet hours, perhaps a cramped room, Bible open, the din of London outside, his spirit rising to where the Savior sits, interceding for the nations. MacArthur's thread runs true. He began to feel the burden of Christ became my burden. It's the fruit of living above, not detachment, but a deeper attachment, a love so fierce it shatters complacency. On that beach, Taylor couldn't unsee China's need, couldn't unfeel Christ's pulse. And so he acted, founding the China Inland Mission, sending ripples that touched millions. He left the world, not its shores at first, but its smug piety, to reach it with a gospel it didn't know it craved. For us, this is no dusty history lesson. It's a mirror held to our own souls. I've felt that dissonance, sitting in a cozy sanctuary, singing of grace, while headlines scream of despair beyond the stained glass. Taylor's agony stabs. Am I content in my security while others perish? Not in China, maybe, but across the street. A neighbor nursing addiction, a friend cloaked in cynicism, a city numbed by excess. Living in the heavenlies, as we've climbed to see, isn't a private retreat. It's a public charge. I recall a night I walked past a homeless man, head down, until a verse, Matthew 25:40, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these," stopped me cold. I turned back, offered a sandwich, a word, and felt Christ's heartbeat flicker in mine. It's not Taylor's scale, but it's his spirit, a scent-fueling action, heaven touching earth. His burden wasn't abstract, it was visceral, costly. Taylor didn't stay on the sand. He sailed to China, traded suits for robes, learned dialects, buried children in foreign soil. His biographer notes the Brighton congregation's smug piety sickened him, and I see him storming out, unable to stomach a faith that ends at the pew. That's the challenge. Will we climb high enough to sicken at our own ease? I've tasted it, volunteering at a shelter, the stench of unwashed bodies sharp, yet their eyes sharper, piercing my comfort. Taylor's life demands more than sentiment. It demands sweat, tears, a willingness to leave the world's script for Christ's. He prayed for 24, got them, and kept going. Because the heavenlies don't just inspire, they impel, pushing you into the fray with a love that won't rest. This isn't about guilt. It's about glory, the glory of a life aligned with eternity's pulse. Taylor's legacy isn't in numbers, though millions heard through his work, but in the pattern. Dwell above, feel below, act now. I think of a teacher I know, her classroom a battleground of apathy, yet she prays each dawn, carries that peace to her students, watches them bloom. She's no missionary, but she's Taylor's kin, touching earth because her inside lives elsewhere. MacArthur closes with him for a reason. He's the paradox incarnate, the climber who descended to lift. I've failed this plenty, numbed by Netflix, dulled by routine, but when I climb, when I linger in Colossians 3 or John 17, I feel it too. A heartbeat not mine, a world not lost, a call not silent. So I stand on this imagined shore, the explorer beside Taylor, waves crashing as his prayer rises. The hymn fades, the wind bites, and I see it clear. Living in the heavenlies isn't the end, it's the means. Jesus left to return, McChaney preached from the heights. I lift my thoughts from linoleum, and Taylor wept for China, all pointing to one truth. We reach the world by rising above it, not to scorn it, but to save it, not to flee, but to fight. The beach stretches empty now, but the burden lingers, a question in the salt air. Will I climb too? Will I feel Christ's heartbeat until it's mine, until my hands move, my voice breaks, my life bends to the lost? The world waits, near, far, aching, and from this height I can't look away. The tide turns, the day calls, and I step forward, not to stay above, but to bring above down, one burdened, heaven-touched soul at a time.